Sorry if I'm coming across as a bit buzzing and excited, but this is super cool. And this process of doing research into how to accomplish this has opened a really fascinating, interesting, what's the word when you dig down? Hang on. The rabbit hole, a really interesting rabbit hole that I think some of you will find fascinating as well if you're into these retro video console game sounds. Is it really true? Can this thing emulate the sounds of the Sega Mega Drive? It seems to me like there's nothing that this thing can't do. I see it as a super duper open-ended sound module with a kick-ass sampler and Groovebox sequencer built in. But let's head over to the computer and I'll show you how to do it. So why don't we start our journey here actually with a description of the sound chips used in the Sega Mega Drive. It's called the YM2612 and yes, it's by Yamaha, so of course this is related to Yamaha's FM sound chips that they used in their synthesizers. It's a 6-channel FM synthesizer used in several game and computer systems, also in the arcade machines as well, Outrun for example. The games console did contain some other sound chips as well. It had a PCM sound chip for playing back some really crusty samples, as you may remember, the Sega. So the next step of my journey when I was trying to figure out how to get those sounds onto the Machine Plus was to discover this amazing resource, Project 2612. Is that a 2 or a Z? I think it's probably a 2, same as the name of the sound chip, which I've already forgotten. What is this all about, I hear you ask? This is absolutely fascinating. What people have done is downloaded or ripped the ROMs from the cartridges, the Sega Mega Drive cartridges. They've ripped the ROMs and they've extracted all of the audio data from the, what would it have been? The source code, the assembly language source code that was addressing the sound chips. And then they would analyze the data on the ROM cartridge and extract the presets that would program the FM sound chip and also the musical compositions. And all that could be exported as a, stored or archived as a VGM file or VGZ that contains the presets used to address the sound chip and the musical compositions as MIDI data. Of course, the original console wasn't using MIDI, but for convenience, it's been now converted to MIDI on this site. For example, let's go into downloads. Let's go for Sonic the Hedgehog. Why not? Perhaps the most well-known of all of the games. I'm just going to find it here. So as you can see, every single Mega Drive game ever made has been ripped and exported to this MIDI and FM synthesis format. For example, if we click on Sonic the Hedgehog, then we have all of the tracks or all of the levels and themes in this VGZ format. And we can just click here and download them, and that gives us all of the FM synth presets and the MIDI data. For example, you can play them here. Okay, Green Hill Zone. You're just hearing my lav mic at the moment, apologies for that, but we'll listen to these in glorious high fidelity or maybe low fidelity, because that's what we're aiming for here on the Machine Plus. I always thought that Strider had the most amazing soundtrack, and what a great game it was as well. Just take a listen to some of this stuff. Not quite as poppy as Sonic the Hedgehog. Another game that I really enjoyed the soundtrack to was Batman. So just pick your favourite games and download them, and that's the first step. I'll show you some shortcuts later on in the video. So the Batman zip file we just downloaded contains a whole bunch of VGZ files, one for each level or musical theme in the game. But how do we convert these to something that the Machine Plus will understand? And in fact, the nice thing about this process is that it will work for other VST synths as well. You can get these presets and use them in DexEd, for example, or the Arturia DX7 emulation, or FM8 on your PC. So I started Googling, of course, how to convert those to SysX, because that's the format that we need, right? That is understood by all of our VST synthesizers and DX7 emulations. For all you FM lovers out there, this gentleman, Dr. Washington, I just converted pretty much every Sega Genesis Mega Drive for those across the pond into OPM files, which can be loaded into Sam's Fantastic. There are lots of different ways to play these VGZ and VGM files that you download from that resource I showed you earlier. But this guy, check this out.